HighBridge, a division of Recorded Books, presents The Sex Effect, Bearing Our Complicated Relationship with Sex, by Ross Bennis. Read by Rudy, Sanda. Foreword. The human sex drive is powerful and complicated, and it leads to all sorts of unintended consequences. For instance, in the late 20th century, Ron Bennis and Sue Bennis mated, which resulted in a baby named Ross Bennis, who would grow up to be a talented journalist and, much to their surprise, write a book about sex. Sorry to bring your parents' bedroom life into this, Ross. But I'm not sorry your parents procreated. Ross produced a book that is fascinating and original. It's also wide-ranging. Ross talks about the impact sex has had on everything from hipster neighborhoods to politics, from modern warfare to breakfast. In case you didn't know, cornflakes were invented in the 19th century as a way to reduce teenage boys' masturbation habits. They were spectacularly ineffective in that department, but they are still delicious. The book is also provocative, as any book on sex should be. You may not agree with all of Ross's conclusions. I took issue with a couple myself. But you will absolutely enjoy the journey. If I were to pitch the book in an elevator, I'd say it's Freakonomics without pants. Then I'd probably be escorted off the elevator by security. I first met Ross when he was working at Esquire magazine, where I was an editor. He was a fountain of ideas. He talked fast and read voraciously. And he's written some wonderful pieces for both Esquire and for other publications. He wrote about his experience at a silent retreat, which was a brave endeavor since he is the most talkative person I know. He wrote about Scientology, which is also a brave endeavor, because the Scientologists harass journalists for even typing the word Scientology. He has also written about wrestling and his love for Orange High C. But this book about sex is his most interesting work yet. I hope you enjoy it as much as I did, if not as much as the act itself. A.J. Jacobs, New York Times bestselling author of Drop Dead Healthy, The Year of Living Biblically, and The Know-It-All. Introduction. For all the time we spend thinking about it, talking about it, and engaging in it, sex still arouses contention and confusion for many people. From exhibitionists who advocate free love to celibate religious leaders who condemn promiscuity, and everyone in between, sex evokes a powerful reaction across cultures and societies. The emotional response that often follows one of our most primal behaviors has severely distorted the public's understanding of the most basic statistics, trends, and behaviors related to sexuality. Everything from what percentage of the population is gay to how often people divorce. As you'll see, many of the ideas our society holds to be self-evident about monogamy, affairs, divorce, rape, porn, abstinence, STDs, contraception, fertility rates, and reproductive technologies are often far from the empirical truth. Many of these misconceptions about human sexuality occur because sex inevitably incites emotion, and emotion lends itself to politicizing, where statistics are interpreted according to the ethics of whatever group a person identifies with. Other misconceptions likely arise from simple ignorance and fear. And many people also hold misconceptions stemming from the fact that good data gets lost in the vast and incidentally misleading informational overload our culture spews. From celebrities selling gossip to pastors warning of the homosexual agenda, to sex tips in glossy magazines, there is an unending amount of conflicting information that makes it difficult to spot accurate and reliable facts. Sex occupies a significant spot in our civilization, as both a want and a need. Biologically, we need sexual reproduction for our species to survive. Advertisers manipulate the natural human urge to procreate and condition us to desire sex even more by branding our favorite non-sexual products, such as beer, body spray, and food, with sexual images, and by constantly sending subliminal messages that sex can be obtained by purchasing a particular product. Add in religious and cultural taboos relating to sexual behavior, and you get a forbidden fruit syndrome that makes discussing, analyzing, and having sex an alluring and forbidden act, often regarded with simultaneous shame and elation. The stigma surrounding sex makes any rational analysis of sexual behavior nearly impossible outside institutional contexts, because of the overwhelming amount of bias that many researchers, commentators, and theorists allow to cloud their perceptions, which leaves most of us in the dark about how sex actually functions in our society. But our attitudes and beliefs about sex itself are not what is most interesting about it. Scores of books, magazines, and movies have already investigated the battle between our bodies and our ideologies. Understanding the direct impact of sex on our society is very important. But most of the conversations we're currently having on this topic focus on the obvious. It's already clear that sex is all around, causing people to perpetually act irrationally, from politicians risking strategically built careers for a quick tryst, to John soliciting prostitutes during AIDS epidemics. These behaviors seem baffling at first glance, but it makes sense for sex to be at least occasionally unreasonable, because irrational sex has evolutionarily benefited the survival of Homo sapiens. To some degree, humans still retain the tendencies of their ancient ancestors, who were subconsciously compelled to pass on their selfish genes, even though it often wasn't in their best personal interest to do so. Throughout history, people have had children despite lacking the resources to support themselves, let alone provide a high quality of life for their offspring. Today there are Western teens and young adults who have children earlier than they planned, because evolution has predisposed them to reach their peak fertility years during the adolescent stage that contemporary society has constructed. These people were driven by a biological tendency to procreate, because natural selection favors projecting genes into the future over the well-being of an individual's health, sanity, and bank account. As Helen Epstein commented in a report about AIDS in Africa, if sex were an entirely rational process, the species would probably have died out long ago. While the irrational aspect of sex gets a lot of attention, what's actually most fascinating about sex is what has been left out of the conversation. The hidden, but powerful, influences sex imposes on our everyday lives, and conversely, the ways our sexual behavior shape the world around us. Sex's largest impact in our society doesn't come from things the average person would recognize as overtly sexual. Sex workers turning tricks, contraceptives, or instant porn access. Rather, sex's greatest effects can be seen in innocuous, seemingly non-sexual aspects of our everyday lives. The power of sex can also provide political, religious, and business leaders social capital that allows them to gain power. In this book, you'll see how sex indirectly influences society through inadvertently affecting things such as how easily we purchase products online, crime rates, and how people eat breakfast. You'll also see the other side of the coin, how non-sexual aspects of society indirectly influence how people have sex. because past political edicts have conditioned people to stick to one spouse. Pro-natalist policies subtly nudge people to have more children, and the marketing of biomedical products has led people to engage in riskier sex. You'll find that the hidden relationships between sex and political, economic, and religious institutions can shape behaviors ranging from how much income families save to how people rely on others from different religious faiths. This book is about the impact of those relationships, as investigated by an everyday observer rather than a researcher, consultant, politician, moral reformer, or corporate entity already invested in the business of sex. Because human behavior is incredibly complex and has millions of co-occurring variables, it's difficult to draw hard and fast conclusions about how and why sex works in our society. There will be no 3 rules of the sex effect or 7 habits of successful couples principles here. In reality, the investigation of human sexuality's role in society is a multidisciplinary study full of uncertainty and surprise. Think of this book not as a guidebook written by a sexpert, but as a conversation starter meant to inspire dialogue and uncover the hidden relationships between our sexuality and the world around us. Part of the dialogue we're trying to initiate revolves around examining the miscalculations of ideologues. As you'll see, when people in power try to restrict sexual influences, they can create whirlpools of disastrous, unexpected outcomes. But there are other times that deferring to sex-positive, politically correct approaches ends up dumping gas on the flame. Conservative or liberal, Democrat or Republican, Puritan or free lover, devout or agnostic, it doesn't matter. At some point, every group displays improbable logical fallacies when differentiating between its perception of sex and the realities of the world we live in. Each group has, in some ways, blinded itself with its respective ideologies, resulting in unintended sexual and societal consequences. The point of this book isn't to talk about how good or bad sex is, or how, when, and why people should be having it. The point is to get everyday people thinking about what factors really drive sexual decisions, and how human behavior is shaped by their consequences, as viewed through political, economic, and cultural lenses. We'll also look at the opposite angle, how society influences our sex lives, to inspire discussions about how political, economic, and religious policies affect human sexuality. Ideally, this book will get people talking about what makes humans do what they do. And, if nothing else, readers will experience eating cornflakes in a whole new way. Part 1. Politics. 1. What's love got to do with it? How political leaders conditioned Westerners to accept monogamy as the default. In Western society, it's assumed that most adults will eventually find a partner they love and will marry them with the intent of staying together for the rest of their lives, and with the goal of remaining sexually faithful throughout the relationship. What's often unrealized about this commonplace ideal of sticking with one spouse is that it was likely introduced into human society through calculated political strategy, which originally came about as a consequence of war, not love. The ubiquity of monogamy in our society, and its perceived superiority over other marriage models, stems from the decisions of powerful leaders and revolutionary social changes, not natural human instinct. The construct of monogamy is a powerful force in our society, having been shown to reduce crime and motivate fathers to invest more time and resources in their children. But humans are not necessarily naturally inclined to be monogamous, and they constantly battle sexual jealousy. The perceived societal value of monogamous marriage shows how calculated political decisions can last well beyond their original contexts, while still maintaining their influence on human behavior, and how laws can shift humans away from our animalistic instincts. A very brief summary of monogamy's long and convoluted history. The marriage system of any particular society is ultimately tied to what's proscribed by its political structure. Because prehistory involves a lot of gaps and projections, it's difficult to trace the exact evolution of monogamy throughout the world. But we'll briefly break down monogamy's timeline. Although enforced monogamy has been common in Western society for a few thousand years, it's only within the last few hundred years that most of the world's population has lived in monogamous cultures. According to John Witt, Jr., most of this shift occurred when Japan, Thailand, Nepal, China, and India, with exceptions for Muslims, prohibited polygamy. Even though many people practice monogamy today, it was the legal norm in only about 15% of the roughly 1,200 cultures in the Ethnographic Atlas Codebook analyzed from 1962 to 1980. And these are modern stats. The further back you trace mating and marriage practices, the less common enforced monogamy appears to be. There is also a lot of nuance in humanity's history with monogamy, as words like spouse, partner, mate, and marriage have much different connotations depending on what time period they refer to. The level of commitment and the legal status of polygamous partners also tend to vary by culture. But for simplicity's sake, polygamy and its related terms here will just mean someone, usually a man, having more than one regular committed partner, i.e., polygyny. Technically, polygyny is defined as one man in relationships with multiple women, while polyandry is defined as one woman in relationships with multiple men. And there are times when what researchers refer to as polygamy more resembles modern polyamory or promiscuity. To avoid confusion, and to prevent this chapter from having an academic appendix of nuanced linguistic changes every time a new culture or time frame is mentioned, polygamy will function as a catch-all for non-monogamy here. Around 200,000 BC, hunter-gatherers lived in mildly polygamous societies, according to historian Kyle Harper. Men who had wives had about 3 on average, leaving other men partnerless. Some researchers believe that even in these ancient societies that permitted polygamy, most marriages were still monogamous, because it was difficult for most men to acquire enough resources to attract and support multiple wives. Michael Price writes, "Polygyny was the idealized state of marriage in the world of the past, something that the majority of men aspired to but that only a minority could achieve. After another 190,000 years of foraging, hunter-gatherers realized that instead of wandering around to find food, they could plant crops and domesticate animals, allowing for a more stable, stationary livelihood. This led to the invention of agriculture, known as the Neolithic Revolution. The act of creating settlements allowed humans to accumulate new levels of wealth. Along with the benefits of agriculture came property rights, as the ownership of land became paramount for anyone wishing to gain higher status. Eventually, humans began having fewer children and investing more resources in the kids they had. Property rights and the idea of having fewer children to give each child a better quality of life led to rules and codes that bound men, women, and their property together. With land ownership, marriage became more important for inheritance purposes, and it tied couples together in new social and legal ways. Another major effect of land accumulation was the development of enormous income disparity and extreme cases of polygamy. The men with the most wealth and power ended up with the most wives, while men with the least clout often ended up with just one wife, or no wife at all. The prevalence of these non-monogamous societies may have something to do with the fact that the evolutionary benefits of having multiple sexual partners are clear, as having sex with multiple partners gives people a better chance of producing healthy and successful offspring, who will continue to pass their genes along. Generally, males are wired to spread their seed as widely as possible to increase the number of likely offspring. Males also accumulated more wealth so they could attract more women. As to why that is, Lynn Saxon writes, "The sex which invests most in parenting any offspring is a limited reproductive resource competed for by the sex which invests the least. They prefer many trysts with young, fertile women. Females tend to be more selective, as they want the best genes and resources for their limited offspring. They are more likely to select a wealthy spouse who can provide for their child, but are also prone to copulating with a handsome man with superior genes right before ovulation. Men also prefer women's odors near ovulation, which is when women are most likely to conceive. During ovulation, women report a stronger desire to cheat and less likelihood to use a condom during sex. Women also report they feel more attractive when they are at the most fertile stage of their cycle. They also put on more makeup and wear skimpier clothes during this time. In some species, the inclination to seek the best genes, regardless of how many partners an individual may already have, leads to alpha males running a monopoly on female mates, which is somewhat reminiscent of rulers such as King Solomon controlling personal harems. From here, according to Harper, the evolution of monogamy worldwide didn't change much until democracy was invented in Greece around 6th century BC. At the heart of the concept of democracy is the belief that every person's vote matters, and everyone should participate, even if only indirectly in government. As democratic ideals began spreading from government into people's personal lives, it made sense then that every man entitled to a vote should be entitled to a woman, too. Within just a few generations of Homer's Iliad, monogamy became the preferred marriage practice in Greek society. According to Stanford historian Walter Scheidel, monogamy was regarded as quintessentially Greek in the ancient world. Because researchers speculate most marriages in history were monogamous, even if monogamy wasn't what was desired by most men or enforced by most cultures, it's worth noting the Greeks didn't invent pair bonding with a single sexual partner. However, by outlawing polygamy, Greek lawmakers began a slow conditioning process that shaped modern mating. Over time, the social conditioning initially brought on by Greco-Roman rules led to the paired, gradual phenomena of the increasing unacceptability of having multiple long-term sexual partners, and the increasing commonness of sticking with a single partner, to the point that most Westerners now default toward one partner without much questioning of this practice. While democracy may have played a role in Greco-Roman culture's outlawing polygamy and enforcing legal monogamy, the reasons leaders pushed for their followers to legally bind themselves to one spouse show that the story of monogamy is much more than an equality-based feel-good tale. Rather, monogamy was likely enforced because it gave leaders political leverage. Hey, jealousy. As evolutionary biologist David Barish notes in the Chronicle of Higher Education, just as multiple sexual partners can increase the fitness of a philanderer, the same behavior on the part of one's partner can reduce the other's fitness. Hence, sexual jealousy is a very widespread and fitness-enhancing trait, as is a roving eye, along with, occasionally, other body parts. By fitness, Barish is referring to the evolutionary concept of an organism's ability to see its genes carried on by future generations. Barish indicates that sexual jealousy developed so animals and humans could ensure they were raising their own offspring, and not the child of some wandering philanderer. To better understand modern humans' pesky, jealous quirks, you need to understand the ancient environment in which human brains evolved. Evolutionary psychologists refer to this setting as the environment of evolutionary adaptedness, EEA. It is in this ancient context that humans became subconsciously focused on having the highest number of surviving offspring. But some evolutionary adaptations developed in the EEA have outlived their usefulness. A common example is how humans developed a taste for sugary food in an environment where fruit existed and candy didn't. Eating sweet, ripe fruit was good for the diet. But sweet foods were rare, and finding them was a difficult task, which meant it was in the people's best interests to load up on scarce, sugary substances when they came across them. But now, humans have an urge to eat lots of sugar in an environment filled with processed foods and high-fructose corn syrup, which present new dietary challenges our ancestors never faced. Overindulging in this tendency for sweets can lead to obesity, high blood pressure, tooth decay, and eventually death. Similarly, overindulgence in the inherited desire for males to spread their seed can also cause discolored, rotting infections that can eventually lead to death. So even though many couples plan to never have children, they still get angry over infidelity. This jealous impulse comes from past reproductive strategies. But being familiar with our ancestors' EEA will be of little practical concern to a wife who catches her husband screwing his secretary, or a husband who catches his wife with her yoga instructor. Research from David Buss, an evolutionary psychologist who specializes in mate selection research, shows that each gender evolved to react to jealousy differently. When imagining sexual unfaithfulness, men get sweaty and their heart rates jump more than the Dow Jones after a market boom. Men react to emotional infidelity as well, but not to the same magnitude. For women, the results are reversed. Envisioning emotional infidelity causes more distress than sexual unfaithfulness. The reasons go back to evolution. Ancient males feared their wives would get pregnant by a rival male, so sex with strange men wasn't to be tolerated. Males who became obsessed over their wives' social and sexual habits made sure their women weren't getting impregnated by other men, which gave the genes of these jealous males a better chance of projecting themselves into future generations. Females feared their men would desert them and move on to giving other women their resources. Women whose jealousy brought them to shield their men from becoming emotionally involved with other women helped ensure that their man's resources wouldn't be spent elsewhere, which gave these women's offspring a better chance at survival. People with these jealous tendencies had better chances of passing on their genes, and over time, those with a genetic predisposition toward gender-specific jealousy were more likely to successfully spawn offspring that would survive into adulthood, and to see their genes live on. Women don't enjoy their men sleeping around, nor do men enjoy their women emotionally bonding with other men behind their back. But in general, for evolutionary reasons, males react more strongly to sexual infidelity and females to emotional infidelity. Do as the Romans do. It's likely that Greece influenced the Romans to adopt monogamy and embed it into their culture. Greeks and Romans did occasionally allow polygamy in a few exceptional cases. Athenian officials allowed it after the Peloponnesian War killed most of the city's men, necessitating repopulation efforts. Some rulers in Macedonia and the Aegean Islands practiced polygamy as well. The ancient law of Rome defined lawful marriage as the union of a man and a woman.
Sample complete. Ready to continue?